And I would like to call to order this meeting of the De Pere Sustainability Commission for December 13th. Betty, can we have the roll, please?
Alderperson Quigley?
Here.
Commissioner Black?
Here.
Commissioner Champeau?
Here.
Commissioner Henry Gillis?
Here.
Commissioner Lawton?
Here.
Commissioner Akers?
Here.
All right, thank you. Next agenda item, public comment on any matters not on the agenda. So comments made during the public comment period shall pertain only to matters under the jurisdiction of the Sustainability Commission. Is there anybody here that would like to address the board, or anybody virtual? I don't know, Scott, I can't see it from here. Do you know if we have anybody with us in the online universe? No. Okay. Second time, any public comments for matters that are not on the agenda? And third and final request for public comments. All right, then we're going to go ahead to agenda item number 3, approval of the minutes from the previous Sustainability Commission, which was Tuesday, October 11th. I'll entertain a motion.
Just, I won't vote because I wasn't here.
So moved.
Fair enough. All right, so I have a motion from Commissioner Lawton and a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the previous meeting, say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you. I'm looking at the wrong paper here. All right. Next up, we have a presentation from Greener Bay Compost on composting. And is it Corey? Is that right?
Yep, Corey Groshek.
All right. And I'm just going to turn it over to you. And if you can introduce yourself.
So I should identify myself. I actually live in Green Bay. My address is 1597 Forest Glen Drive, Green Bay, Wisconsin, 54304. Again, I'm Corey Groshek. I'm the founder and CEO of Greener Bay Compost. We're a local, family-owned, very small compost company that's based out of Green Bay, but it has a compost site about 10 miles west of Pulaski in the town of Lesser. We've existed since July of 2021, so we've been around for about 16 months now, and everything's going, I think, really well. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you, everybody, for hosting me, and I really like that this is in person, so you can all get to take home a sample of our compost and see how it works for your plants, your friends and family's plants. The reason I wanted to do this presentation for you on who we are, what we do, and why we do it is because I think there's a big potential for the city of De Pere and me and my company to work together to accomplish a lot of the goals I think a lot of you might have, which is to make De Pere a much more sustainable and really just a great place to live, greater than it even is right now. And I think a big part of that would be trying to keep as much of our food waste out of the landfill as possible. That's really what my company is all about. On the first slide, you'll see I refer to us being a small company making a big difference. And when I get to some of the numbers of what we've already kept out of the landfill just in the last 16 months, I think you'll be really shocked at what this little husband and wife team that my wife and I are here have accomplished. And with the city of De Pere's help, I think we could really exponentially grow this whole thing and really make a gigantic impact, positive impact for the environment. So you'll see our tagline up on the first slide is because food waste is not garbage. That pretty much sums up in a nutshell why we exist. The entire reason I created Greener Bay Compost was, first of all, there was no company like Greener Bay Compost in Green Bay. There are companies like mine in Milwaukee, Madison, Eau Claire, even in Stevens Point, which is where I grew up. There's even one in Sheboygan, but there's nothing within 60 miles of here. That was until I created Greener Bay Compost. So it was to fill a niche. I saw that there was a need for this service, and I actually polled my neighbors on the website, if you're familiar with nextdoor.com. It's kind of like Facebook, but for your neighborhood. And I got an overwhelmingly positive response from all of my neighbors when I asked if a compost pickup service, basically a door-to-door service that would take your food scraps and compost them for you, would be something that my neighbors would be interested in. And within 30 days of me getting that positive response, I had the website set up, I had a payment system set up, and I had all the buckets with this beautiful logo on the front, and I was dropping them off. And then a week later, I was getting food waste from people and starting to compost it for them, making their lives easier and our environment a whole lot healthier. For those of you who don't know, this food waste problem, it's not just a De Pere problem, a Green Bay area problem, it's nationwide, it's worldwide. About 40% of the food that's produced in our country gets wasted, and a Wisconsin DNR waste characterization study from 2021 that just was released not too long ago showed that about 20 to 30% of what is in landfills, and this looked at landfills all over the state, was something that could have been composted. A lot of it was inedible food parts, like think banana peels, skins on onions, but a very large portion of it was also edible food, things that could have been eaten. Like think a brown banana, you could put it in a smoothie or make a banana bread out of it, but instead it was ending up in the landfill. This stuff is wet and it's heavy, and it costs a lot of money for municipalities, large and small, to have to send to the landfill, whether you're doing it yourself like Green Bay does, or whether you've got a private hauler like a Waste Management doing it. It's expensive. So one of the big benefits of getting this stuff out of the landfill, on top of the environmental benefits, is just not having to pay to take all that wet, heavy stuff and truck it, sometimes 20, 30 miles away, depending on what municipality you are. If you want to go to the next slide, Scott, thanks. So we basically have three missions here. The number one mission is, like I just alluded to, it's to divert as much organic waste, primarily food waste, from landfill as possible so we can upcycle it into a value-added soil amendment, which is what's in all those little baggies I distributed to all of you. It's a sample of our compost. And prevent toxic methane from being released into the environment. For those of you who don't know, methane is a greenhouse gas. It's like carbon dioxide, but 20 to 30 times better at trapping heat in the atmosphere than all the CO2 we hear about. So I think one of the ways you can get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of addressing the climate change issue that everybody's got on the tip of their tongues these days is get the methane out of the landfill. That means don't send the food waste there, because when you compost it, you don't actually produce methane, assuming that you compost it properly. The number two mission, and this is a big goal of mine I'd like to build on the next 5 or 10 years, is creating and maintaining what I call a culture of composting, not just in De Pere, but this entire area, which will hopefully expand. Right now, we're serving residents within 9 municipalities, including De Pere and Green Bay, so about a 12-mile radius from the center of Green Bay, but I'd like to grow that and possibly encompass Appleton and the Fox Valley soon in the next couple of years. What I'd like to do is create a culture that's similar to what already exists in other cities like Madison, where people in Madison almost would feel odd about throwing food in the trash because there's actually way more options for composting there. They actually have 3 companies that are like mine now serving Madison, and UW-Madison itself has a really great composting program. And the city there has actually tried for over a decade to get a municipal program going, but it's in starts and fits. They thought they had it down, but then the hauler who was handling their material, I should say the composter who was handling their material, decided they didn't want food waste anymore, so pulled the rug out from underneath Madison. And I don't want to see that happen to De Pere. So that's one of the other reasons why I've created this company, so that you have a local company that's focused entirely on composting food waste, so you don't have to worry about them, say, wanting to compost manure instead, which is what happened to Madison. And ideally, I'd like composting to become a household word. I want everybody to know what it is. I want everybody to know what the benefits are. Honestly, I want people to feel weird about throwing food waste in the trash. I want them to know there's a better option. There is another option, which is us, or even doing it in your own backyard. I'd rather see somebody do that than not do it at all. The third mission we have is to produce what you have in your bags there, which is what we think is the highest quality compost possible for use in local gardens, flower beds, agriculture, even your house plants at home could benefit from this stuff. Compost is basically a superfood for all plants. Doesn't matter whether it's a tomato or a succulent, all plants love compost. And so we'd like to make the best compost we can. And that's actually going to help in a couple ways. It's going to make our area more sustainable and more resilient. And when I say resilient, it kind of ties into the whole idea of why we have community gardens. It's supposed to help us for in the event that something like a pandemic happens again, or inflation, which is running rampant. We don't have to depend so much on the stores to buy our food. Compost is great at helping you grow better, healthier, better tasting, and more nutritious food right in your own backyard. So another goal of ours is to try to help people do that and not have to depend on big box stores to get all of their overpriced fertilizer brought in from outside the country. Next slide. So we're one business, 2 segments. The first part of what we do is compost pickup and drop-off services, which we perform using this bucket here, 5-gallon food-safe FDA-approved buckets. You'll notice there's a bag in here. This is a 100% compostable bag made by our friends at BioBag. They gave me this hat for free, by the way. That's why I love this hat, but I also wear it because I love advertising for them. Their bags are great. They stop food waste from sticking to the inside of our buckets in warm weather, and they stop it from freezing to the buckets in winter. And also makes cleaning the buckets up a lot easier. By the way, every week we clean these with soap and water. That's another big benefit of what we do for anyone who signs up for our pickup or drop-off services. Unlike some compost companies, which leave you to clean up the messy bucket yourself when they're done taking your food waste from you, we actually give you a completely new bucket. So this one right here is brand new, sparkling clean. We just washed it. And a lucky lady tomorrow is actually going to be getting this bucket. I have a drop-off set up with her tomorrow at 8 a.m., so she'll be taking this home. The gist of it is we do a pickup service where we come to you. This is great for anybody who might have a disability or just doesn't want to drive or doesn't want to drive, for example, in all the snow that's coming in the next couple of days. We come to you. We brave the weather so you don't have to. We also have a drop-off service, which I created because we were getting a lot of inquiries from people who live in apartments. Maybe they're worried that an apartment manager or landlord will not take too kindly to having a bucket of what they might still see as trash sitting outside their apartment door. Also, because you can't really do the service when you have to be buzzed into an apartment. I need to be able to get to the buckets on a schedule. And so what I did is I created a service where the subscriber comes to us. I meet them in a well-lit public location to do the same type of bucket swap that I do at people's homes with the pickup service. So it's still up to about 2 swaps every month. So they're getting the same service. It's just they have to do a little bit of the driving to meet me in the middle. And so I usually do this right in the middle of Green Bay. So whether you're in De Pere or Swamico, Hobart, east side of Green Bay, west side, I have a nice central location that everybody can come to, and full of cameras so everybody can feel safe to make it more accessible. And finally, we have a small business compost pickup service. It's been growing a little bit slowly because it's a harder sell to sell a business that already pays for trash and recycling on doing a third service, which is composting. But I'm happy to say in August, we picked up Glass Nickel Pizza in downtown Green Bay. And actually just this morning, we signed on Kavarna. If any of you have ever been to Kavarna, they're big on sustainability and organic food. We just got them aboard, and actually on Thursday I'm meeting with NWTC. We're doing a site visit just to finalize plans, and I'm going to start serving NWTC on Mason Street in Green Bay, starting on probably next Tuesday. The other half of our business is actually selling the product that we produce from all of this food waste that we're collecting from our subscribers. We sell it in 1 cubic foot bags. We also sell it in gallon bags by popular demand. Not everybody needs a big cubic foot bag for a backyard garden. They just have a house plant or two to feed. So I accommodated those requests by creating gallon sized bags, which by the way, we sell these things directly, but we also sell the gallon bags out of a retail store in Swamico called Soul Purpose. It's kind of like a brick and mortar Etsy store where a lot of creative types will sell art and jewelry, homemade candles, but they also sell my compost now. So if any of you ever wants to buy a gallon bag, that's where you can go if you don't want to buy it directly from us. And then, of course, we do free cup sample bags, too. That's the ones you have there to just try to get the word out about how great what we make is. So you can try it a little bit at a time if you don't feel like buying any right away. So next slide. So the way these compost pickup and drop-off services work, and this is generally because with businesses, it's way more nuanced. I work with businesses to come up with a way to swap buckets that works better for them. But when it comes to serving residences, it's really cookie cutter. What we do is we give you a clean, food-safe 5-gallon bucket like this. Like I said, it's got a BPI certified compostable liner in it. When you take the lid off the bucket, the first thing you notice is there's wood shavings in the bottom. We put those in there, whereas other compost companies necessarily don't. I only know one other one that does, because we want to help control moisture and odor. Those are 2 big problems a lot of people have, especially if they have a lot of wet material in the buckets. So these wood shavings, which we actually saved from a firewood producer in Bellevue who was going to burn the wood shavings if we didn't take them from him, we saved those from getting burned. We put them in the bottom of the bucket, and it just makes the whole experience a lot more pleasant for everyone. Then really, the next part is simple. On those lists I gave to you, and which is available on our website, gbcompost.com, you'll see there's a list of acceptable materials and not acceptable materials. Anything that's acceptable, you can just put it right in the bucket. It's really that easy, and then you just put the lid right back on top. Next time you chop some veggies for dinner, you just throw those scraps in the bucket. Next time you eat a banana, throw the peel in there. Obviously remember to take the stickers off. That's a big one for us. We've had a lot of issues with stickers. Every composter does. But once you've got that filled up over the course of about 2 weeks, you put the bucket outside for us on a schedule, and we do email reminder notices the day before to remind everyone to put the bucket outside. Then we come get the bucket from you. We swap it out for, like I said earlier, a brand new clean bucket, and then, just rinse and repeat, start the whole process over again. So none of your organic waste, as long as it's on our acceptable list, goes in the landfill anymore. And we've actually received some comments from a lot of subscribers who've said their amount of household trash has reduced by 30, 40, even 50%. One subscriber in Ashwaubenon just told me that she actually feels guilty about even putting her trash cart on the street for Ashwaubenon because there's nothing in it. I've had that same experience. I often won't even have to put my trash out for maybe 2 weeks, even 3. If it wasn't for me having cats, I wouldn't even have to put it out for probably a month or 2 sometimes, to be honest. Next slide. So this right here is a really good example of just some random photos of some of the contents of the buckets we've picked up in the last 16 months. You'll see there's eggshells, banana peels, baby carrots, corn and cobs. There's food in there that looks like it could still be eaten, but there's also scraps of things that are obviously not going to be eaten. We don't try to judge anybody for what they put in the bucket. If it's acceptable, if it's food, if it'll compost, we take it. We're not in the business of judging somebody and saying, you should have eaten that. That's not what we do. By the point they give it to us, we're assuming maybe it was a child who didn't like their pizza crust, or maybe somebody thought they liked avocados and they found out they hate avocados. We'd rather take them than have them end up in a landfill. That's the whole point. Next slide. Now, and I think this is the most amazing part, and this is what made me want to do composting. If you look at the picture on the left, that's what a pile starts as. It's about a 4 by 4 foot, maybe by 4 feet to 5 feet tall pile of food scraps mixed with carbon sources like shredded paper, cardboard, and fall leaves. And then on the right side is what that same pile looks like 13 to 14 weeks later, after we turn it to aerate it and make sure we've got water in it, because they need both air and water to break down. Now, that picture doesn't do this justice. That was on a hot, sunny day in summer, but the product actually looks like what you have in your bags there, which is why compost is called black gold by many people, not just for what it does for plants in terms of making them taste better and be healthier and look healthier, but in terms of what it looks like. You'll notice that what's in those bags looks like soil. If you were to open the bags, you'll also notice it does not smell. Compost doesn't smell like manure. A lot of people who aren't familiar with compost think it's going to smell like manure. I've bought bags of actual soil from stores, and it smelled like manure when it shouldn't. Our product never smells like that. It also has the feel of soil, and it's not soil, though. It's actually a soil amendment. It's teeming with not just vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that came from all the plant material and other acceptable materials that went into it, but it's also teeming with life, as in microbes, which are actually responsible for turning the pile that's on the left side of the screen into the pile that's on the right side. So what's actually happening in a compost pile is millions and millions of tiny little microbes are working together to basically eat this food, and they turn it into the finished product. And so that's why you need to turn the piles to get some air into them, which we do every week. You need to keep them moist, kind of like a wrung out towel, not soaking wet, but just wet enough so that they have something to drink, because these microbes are just like us. They need food, water, and air. So basically what I'm doing, I wouldn't say I'm farming, but I like to say I'm a microbe farmer. So whereas some farmers, they grow corn, I basically raise and nurture to maturity all these microbes in every single pile. Yep. So at the end of the day, then we take that pile that you see there and we run it through an automated sifter, which has a 1/4-inch screen in it to get it down to that really granular, beautiful stuff you have there. About half of what's in that pile you see on the right is what we call overs. It's the big chunky stuff that doesn't fit through the screen. We don't sell that. We recompost it. So none of that gets wasted. It goes right back into brand new piles. And sooner or later, that stuff's also going to look like the material that's in your bags, in which we sell. Next slide. I won't get into all of these. This is on a front page of our website, but I give you 7 of the best reasons to sign up with us, as well as some of the major benefits of composting. I've got my list here because it's harder for me to read it up there. But the main thing is it helps you reach your waste reduction and sustainability goals, reduce your carbon footprint if that's something you're concerned about. It does prevent the release of methane into the atmosphere. And by the way, if anybody's ever driven through or past Appleton, if you've smelled the smell of their landfill, that's methane you smell. It smells like natural gas. Our compost piles never smell like that. They never have and they never will. And so that's what we're trying to avoid, is that type of thing happening. If anybody is concerned about fighting climate change locally, I don't think there's anything better they could do than compost. It's something where you can take control of your own life. In your own life, and you can actually do right at home. You can do this in a tumbler in your backyard or a compost pile, or you could just sign up with a service like ours if you don't have the time, the energy, or maybe you just don't want to go outside when it's 20 below zero and try to turn a compost pile that's probably frozen. You can just basically have us do it for you. And I did reference to the 20 to 50% drop in your household trash. If that's something people are concerned about, it's just making too many trips to their curb with their bin every week, or just wasting a lot of plastic bags, which also aren't great for going into a landfill, but there's not a whole lot we can do about that. That is something that we can help with. And then I kind of tongue-in-cheek make a reference to the fact that you can impress all your friends, family members, and coworkers with your commitment to sustainability. I would say more often than not, though, people don't do this to impress other people. They do it because they think it's the right thing to do. I have a lot of people who are signed up with us who've moved here from other places that already have a great, what I call, culture of composting. Madison, Portland, Chicago. I've got people from Seattle. I've got some people who moved here from San Francisco. They all came from places where either their college was composting or the city had something going on, or they had a service like mine, and they basically just carry their habits over into this area, which I love to see. But then you've got people who, they like to compost because they honestly have anxiety over this idea that they first of all created this food waste, but then that it's going to go in a landfill and it's just going to make the problem worse. So for them, it's almost better than a drug. It's better than going to see a therapist. Signing up with us, it just takes away every ounce of anxiety that they've been suffering over this, and just solves the problem that they see that they have. I actually had a subscriber. He's a realtor, and I've gotten to know him personally. His wife actually signed him up for our service as a birthday present, and he said it's the best present he ever got, for what that's worth. As far as some of the major benefits of the actual compost itself, and there's a lot of things that Pere might like about this too, not just in terms of what this could do for the environment, but there's actually municipal uses for compost as well, in terms of preventing soil erosion. Like, for example, if you do a lot of road work, one of the things compost does really well is it prevents erosion. This is why a lot of states are actually now mandating that compost be used, for example, when they build a new entrance or exit ramp on the highway, because it's going to prevent all that soil from getting washed away. Because compost is like a sponge, and that's one of the other major benefits, is it holds moisture like nothing else. One thing I've noticed when I use compost in my own gardens is there's no splash. When it rains on my gardens, there's no splash up onto the leaves, which helps the plants be healthier because it's not getting all this bad bacteria all over the leaves. It also helps maintain moisture. For example, if you don't want to water your plants or your garden as much, like this past summer, I only watered like a full-on watering session 3 times. The summer previous to that, I had to be out there probably at least every other day watering because my plants looked really parched. This year I had so much compost, and I just use the overs. I don't even use the good stuff. I just use the big chunky stuff that nobody likes to look at. And I didn't have to water much at all. One of the other benefits is it enriches the actual soil. I actually got the best, I would say, harvest of peppers and tomatoes and things like cucumbers and zucchinis I've ever gotten in my entire life after using this compost in my gardens. So I barely have to supplement with anything else. Compost is not a fertilizer. A lot of people think it is, but it's not like a quick hit nitrogen fertilizer. It's more like a slow release. If you've ever taken a slow release tablet of anything, that's what compost is for plants. It's a slow release soil amendment that feeds it not just for a day or a week, but over the course of months and years. Basically, if you add compost once a year, or even better, twice a year, you're going to see those benefits for your garden for years and possibly decades into the future. So you don't want to overdo it, but it's really hard to overdo it with compost. Most people wish they had more of it, not less. Also, there's the benefit of us taking what was food waste, what most people think is garbage, and we're taking this and turning it into something infinitely more valuable when you're talking about compost. You're talking about something that most people want to pay to get rid of, and we're basically investing to take more of it in, because we don't see food waste as garbage. We see it as a valuable resource. Which shouldn't be going in a landfill. It should be going back into the earth. I don't care whether it's in a garden or on somebody's fields where they're growing corn, or in your potted plant. It belongs in the soil. So And then I would say one other thing, and a lot of people don't think about this, and maybe haven't heard about this, it sequesters carbon from the atmosphere. So when you put compost on anything outside, it's actually sucking carbon out of the air and putting it back in the soil, which is where we really want it to be, because plants also need a lot of carbon to be healthy. And of course, it encourages the production of beneficial bacteria and fungi in our soil. The compost in those bags, it has fungus spores in it, but it also has bacteria. And when you add that to any soil, any houseplant, you're actually inoculating those things with all this good stuff, which then multiplies if you keep it alive by feeding and watering it. And the more of that stuff you have in there, the healthier plants are going to be, the more resistant to diseases they're going to be. So for example, if I was to say donate some of our compost to the community gardens, I believe there's maybe 1 or 2 of them now in De Pere. I think that the people that pay to rent these gardens, they'd probably have the best production, the best harvest they've ever had. So my ultimate goal is to try to get more of this compost into the hands of the people who really need it, so that, you know, we don't, again, depend on the grocery store so much. Next slide. And I'm going to run down this list really quick. This isn't all of the accomplishments to date, but we have a lot. In the last 16 months, we've grown from 16 residential subscribers to 140 plus. We've diverted over, and this is the number I told you might surprise you earlier, 23 tons of our subscribers' waste. This doesn't count all the things we don't take from our subscribers. This is just what we pick up from our subscribers. And that's just in the last year or so. We started selling our compost in June of this year. We got it into Sole Purpose, the store I mentioned earlier in Swamico, just a few months ago. Like I mentioned earlier, we brought on Glass Nickel as our first small business subscriber in August, and then just this morning brought on Kavarna, and then we actually have a couple other businesses, including NWTC, in the pipeline. We're probably going to be bringing them on in the next few months. We've been featured on the television news 3 times, NBC 26, Fox 11, and Local 5 Live. We've been in the Press Times newspaper twice. The first time was in May, which is the article you see on the right side of the screen. That's me standing next to the very first compost pile we built at our new compost site, which we just acquired in May. That picture was taken literally the day after we took the keys to the place. We already had a compost pile there. That's how serious we are about this. And then the most recent coverage of us was about another accomplishment that's listed there, which is we actually just won the Wisconsin DNR's 2022 Recycling Excellence Award. And I'm proud to say it wasn't just us. Another composter, which is in my hometown of Stevens Point, called Bucket Ruckus, also won. And then so did my good friend Melissa Taushen's company, Compost Crusader, which is in Milwaukee. So 3 community composters all won this award in the overall category, which is basically to reward us for doing a great job of not just keeping the waste out of landfill, but showing that you can be innovative and that you can do this on a local level and make a real difference with a small company. Because the DNR's hope in giving us this award is it's going to inspire others to do the same or similar things to what we're doing, and encourage others like municipalities like De Pere to partner with us to grow this and make a bigger impact. So that the most recent Press Times article was actually about that, the fact that we won. And that just came out, I believe, on the 15th or the 20th of November. And then finally, and this might not seem big to a lot of other people, but it's big to me, we actually convinced the city of Green Bay to take its first official action as a city to support us. They have what they call a landfill alternatives list, which is available on their Public Works Department website, which gives you options for what you can do with items to not have to send them to the landfill. For example, Craigslist is on there. But they also have Goodwill, Habitat for Humanity Restore, and the Salvation Army. And effective January of 2023, they've agreed to add us to the list. So we're going to be up there with those big names. And I think that's just a big stamp of approval from Green Bay. And I hope we're going to be able to build on that. Next slide. This is, I won't comment too much on this. It's just a picture of me with our sifted, actually finished compost before we run it through a sifter, which is covered in the background by a tarp. This is me holding our award from the DNR. And you'll see at the bottom is the quote I gave to the DNR is, again, summarizing what we're all about. When they asked me why is waste reduction important to us, I said waste reduction and diversion is important to us because we believe that food waste is not garbage. It's a valuable resource full of nutrients, which, again, should be put back into the earth, not a landfill. Next slide. And then finally, I'd like to tell you, what does all of this have to do with De Pere? I've touched on it a little bit. First, I want you to know, we have 26 De Pere residents already signed up for our residential compost pickup service. So De Pere residents already make up 20% of our entire subscriber base. Another 60% is Green Bay, and then the other 20% is the other 7 municipalities that we're serving residents in. What we'd like to do long-term here is get help from De Pere with diverting, again, as much of this food waste from landfill as possible. And so what I've been looking at lately is what are other cities doing to partner with companies like mine. And I found a very interesting blueprint out of Falls Church, Virginia. Now, the company in Virginia is called Compost Crew. They did not approach the city. The city of Falls Church actually approached them. They looked at their service and they thought, well, they understand that it's worth every penny of what people are paying for it, but they wanted to get the cost down to make the service more accessible to lower income people, people who may have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic and by inflation and rising gas prices. So what they decided to do, and it might seem revolutionary until you realize there's actually more cities doing this, like for example, Fredericks, Virginia is toying around now, or Maryland, excuse me, is toying around with this idea. What they decided to do in Falls Church was partially subsidize the service of compost crews. So in Compost Crew's case, their service costs $30 a month. Ours doesn't. It's $20 a month starting next year. What they decided to do was cut that down to $6 by using their funds. I'm not sure if they used grant funding or if it was taxpayer funding, but they decided to chop that down to something they thought was more reasonable, with the idea that they might raise that price, pay a little bit less later, maybe get it up to the point where people are paying $10 a month. But the idea was to make it less expensive so more people could take advantage of it. Their initial goal was get 300 people signed up. They blew past that really quickly. And then their next goal was 600, and they blew past that within the first 2 years. So there was a lot of interest in what they're doing. Basically, it's the same thing I'm doing with Greener Bay Compost, just in Virginia. Now, Falls Church is a little smaller than De Pere. I think it's about 16,000 population. But the idea is you don't have to be a big city to do something like this. You could actually, it might even be easier to do it as a smaller city because there may not be as many hurdles to get over, as much approval to get, as many people affected by the decision. I think De Pere would be a wonderful place to try to give something like that a try, but that's not really the only idea I have. I have a lot of other ideas, but we don't have time to go into them all right now. But any and all support that we could get from De Pere in the months and years ahead to try to support what we're doing and grow it and expand it would be greatly appreciated. So I think that's it for my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you for saying leaves, because leaves aren't trash. And a lot of people view leaves as trash.
Yeah, you said a lot of people believe it's trash?
Yeah, leaves.
Too many.
Yeah, that's true, and I think that's the biggest hurdle to overcome in terms of educating people. And people won't stop thinking it's trash until they have an option other than sending it to the landfill. I didn't actually know what composting was 5 years ago. And as I was mentioning to some of the members of the commission before the meeting started today, had I known about what composting was, 30 years ago, I would have been doing this my whole life. I had a father who grew up on a farm, and I was upset with him that he never told me what it was. I guess they didn't do much composting on the farm he grew up on. But I think that's where you start. You have to teach people there are other options, but that starts with actually giving them other options. And until I started the company, there really wasn't another option. It's either you throw it in the landfill or, maybe bury it in your garden bed and hope that a rat doesn't dig it up or a raccoon doesn't. And that's another big problem, by the way, is people are scared of rats. This is the big issue for municipalities is how do you stop rats and harboring rats, and also how do you stop offensive odors? I actually spoke to a Green Bay inspector who is responsible, unfortunately, for having to write tickets to people, and he said one of the biggest issues they have is people who don't want to throw food waste in the trash. They just chuck it in their backyard garden. They don't bury it with leaves. They don't dig a trench. They just leave it there, and then the rats show up. And that's another reason why people think it's trash, because it does tend to attract rats if you don't treat it properly like we do.
I'm a member of this. I just joined. He did my first pickup. I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I thank you for the presentation, and I just love your enthusiasm. So congratulations on your success with the business so far, and I think it's fantastic. Does anybody else have questions for Corey? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So I think it's a really cool approach you've got here. I've got a self-composter. I've been doing it for a couple of years now. I haven't thrown coffee grounds, filters, anything in the garbage forever. So I really like what you're doing. I just have a couple questions.
Sure.
So, for me, I've got my little bucket underneath the sink, all the food scraps go in there. I can take it out whenever it's full. where do people store the bucket that take your service, and how do they handle the summer with odor, and how do they handle winter with freezing if they put it out in their garage? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. I've actually gone into people's garages. They've given me their garage codes sometimes when they forgot to put it out, and I've had to go get them from the garage. Some people keep the bucket in their garage. I actually know someone who keeps it right underneath their sink. They have a space for it. I know some people who keep it in a pantry, and in my case, I'll tell you what I do. I just keep it right next to a counter in my kitchen because it doesn't smell. The wood shavings inside this bucket prevent most of that issue. And if you put soiled paper towels, and by the way, this is something that's on my list of things we take soiled paper towels. Any type of high carbon material like a paper towel will blunt the offensive odors. Now, you can overpower that if you put something like watermelon and rotting broccoli and cauliflower together. It's the worst combination ever. It smells worse than rotting fish, in my opinion. But the reason why most people put it in their garage or out, some people keep it outside, although I don't encourage that, just because in winter, if the lid gets condensation, I can freeze shut, and then you're going to have a hard time getting it off. But also, the buckets tend to get really filthy when you keep them outside. And my whole point is we give everybody a sparkling clean bucket with wood shavings. There's really no reason to have to keep it outside. You can keep it right inside your house, although if it wasn't for me having a space for it in my kitchen, I'd probably put it in my garage where there's more space. But really, you can keep it anywhere you want. It's not going to be a problem. As long as you don't just have the lid completely off, I don't think you're going to have any issues with smell or anything of that nature.
Okay. And then, so each person gets one bucket. Do you ever do any extra pickups? So for me, I've got a pear tree, and if I don't get all the pears out on time, they get rotten. You know, I'll put in my composter. That's a problem. There's too many. Do you do extra pickups in the fall if people have things like that they want to get rid of? Is that something they can coordinate with you for extra cost, or how do you handle that?
Good question. Well, I should point this out. I forgot to mention this on our list of accomplishments. We do some extra pickups of things where we've determined there's a big need to do it, and it presents an opportunity to get a very big amount of material out of the landfill in just a couple weeks. Just 2 months into us starting our company in August of 2021, I did what I called the first annual pumpkin drive. The whole goal was to get pumpkins away from the landfill, because even I am guilty of throwing a pumpkin in the trash years and years ago. I did not know any better, but now I do. And one of our goals is get these big, wet, heavy pumpkins out of the landfill. So in 2021, we kept probably about a ton or ton and a half of them out of landfill. This year, we kept just shy of 3 tons out. And that, by the way, is about 1/5, I think, of what we kept out of the landfill in total in our first year. So we did that in just 3 Fridays in November this year. So we do that. We do pumpkin pickups, but we also were taking corn stalks, gourds, spaghetti squash, whatever people have out for their fall decorations. Indian corn, we were taking that too. We do let people pay for extra pickups. Let's say they fill these buckets up too quick. They've got a couple options. We do what we call a special one-time swap. So let's say you're on our most popular plan is an every other week pickup plan. If somebody fills this bucket up in a week, they can pay for an extra pickup. We'll meet them up at our normal drop-off spot, not their house, because some people are 12 miles away from our home base, but we'll basically meet them in the middle, and we'll give them an extra swap so they can get a new clean bucket. But we also have add-a-bucket options for people who routinely produce too much waste. They can fit in a bucket over the course of 2 weeks. I actually have a couple subscribers who have 2 buckets, and I have one who is really an overachiever, and she has 3, believe it or not. That's actually just one less than the restaurant Glass Nickel has, just to give you an idea of how much waste comes out of this 4 or 5 person household. So we're really flexible. We have a lot of options for people who, some people might produce 10 pounds of waste in a week. Some people might produce 20. We've got an option for everybody.
Okay. If I could just ask
Yeah,
one
please.
one. If you were, say De Pere partners with you on this some way, some form, would there be a special pickup if you had enough people in De Pere, or would we go to Green Bay, or any thoughts on that? Like when I say like a drop-off, I'm referring to your drop-off service.
Sure. Well, I would say that the pickup and drop-off service are open to everybody in Green Bay and De Pere. I'd say it's overwhelmingly people in apartments who are doing the drop-off, just because it's less convenient. I think the reason they're doing that is to avoid raising the ire of a property manager or landlord. But both those services are open to everybody in all 9 municipalities we serve. When you speak of a drop-off, do you mean more of like a place where they can come, like a dumpster kind of thing?
Yeah, or would you have a spot in De Pere for De Pere residents, or so say we partner with you, would there be a spot in De Pere, or would your drop-off service, we'd have to take, all the De Pere residents would have to go to Green Bay? Just
As far as I should bring, I think what you're thinking of, it's some companies do this in other states. We've shied away from it, and the reason being is there's accountability issues. One thing you'll notice, and I'll share this, is there's a number on top of this bucket. The reason we number buckets and lids, whereas other companies don't, is we reward our members individually for keeping waste out of the material. Like, for example, they keep 500 pounds of material out of the landfill. They actually earn an entire cubic foot of bag of our compost from us. But it's also to keep people accountable, because one of the biggest problems, and I alluded to this earlier, is contamination in compost, particularly stickers on things like avocados, apples, bananas. Plastics like that, if they get into our compost, leach microplastics into the compost, which is no good. And so we do our best to try to keep those things out. But what we found is that, let's say you have a compost drop-off system where, rather than us doing swaps with accountability where we know who's giving us what, you just let random people drop, whether they're registered or not, just drop things in a dumpster. What's going to happen is you're going to get way more contamination, especially if you make that drop-off service quote-unquote free, because there's nobody really checking with the individuals to make sure that what they're putting in there is, first of all, acceptable. So you're going to get a lot of contamination. But there's also no way to know who did it. So really what you're left having to do is what I see a lot of my counterparts in other states having to do, which is basically begging people on social media to please stop putting stickers in their buckets. And the same thing would happen with dumpsters, but on a much larger scale. I don't know how many of you may be familiar with what Brown County used to do. Under Mark Walter's leadership at Brown County, they had a food waste and organics diversion program where they actually tried to do what I think you're alluding to, which is they set up several spots in Green Bay where people could take food waste and drop it off. And then they had Sanimax taking the food waste to UW-Oshkosh, where they ran it through a biodigester. It makes methane, but they capture it and use it as energy there. It didn't fail because of contamination, although UW-Oshkosh did complain about compostable bags, and they asked that people please stop using those. Now, I don't have problems with bags because I don't have a biodigester, which chops things up. Basically, these bags get stuck in the gears and machinery of a biodigester. I don't have a machine. Well, I have a tractor I turn the piles with, but I don't have gears turning, so we can handle these bags, whereas other places can't. That program had trouble because of the bags, kind of a contaminant to UW-Oshkosh, but it ultimately shut down because Sanimax stopped picking up food waste. They didn't want to do it anymore. But, and I didn't hear a lot about this from Mark, but I know they had contamination issues because I know that Madison as a city did when they tried to do drop-off and curbside pickup. They had a lot of problems with people who were not being, there was no way to really hold them accountable for the contamination problem, putting things in dumpsters and in bins that shouldn't have been in there. For example, an extreme example, they said they had a taxidermy deer head in a bin. They said they got glass bottles, they got beer cans. Now, I've never seen any of that. Closest I ever got was somebody accidentally put a glass jar from sauerkraut in my bucket, but I'm sure it was an accident. The difference between what we do and what was happening in Madison is I knew who did it. I matched up the number. I sent them a nice email and said, hey, just so you know, this kraut jar ended up in here. Luckily, we caught it. If we would have been a big compost facility, it would have been shattered into probably 1 million pieces, and then that would have cut one of us, me and my wife, or somebody else, or could have ended up in the little bags you have there and hurt somebody who's touching it with their hands. So I guess that would be my big hesitation for doing a drop-off. If there's anonymity to it, I'm not a big fan of it, just because if you want to compost, you want people to do it right. You want them to know that what they put in there has to be actually compostable. It can't be like Walmart bags. It can't be, things they think are compostable but aren't. Like I see these biodegradable packing peanuts. Just because something's biodegradable doesn't mean it's compostable. And we've had problems with people putting those in our buckets, and we've had to send some nice emails to ask them not to do it again. But again, we can address that, whereas you can't really do it with a dumpster drop-off.
No, I understand how you're doing it. You set up the drop-off with the person. I was thinking you told the people that are currently subscribers, hey, I'm doing a pickup, bring your buckets to me at this time, but you set it up. So I was misinterpreting how you're doing it. So.
I'm glad we talked about that too. That's another idea. A lot of cities try what I just mentioned, the whole idea of just doing drop-offs and dumpsters. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't think it's a best way to do it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Other cities have failed at doing that already and had all these contaminant issues. I think we as we as a group here in De Pere as a city could just skip that whole problem. You could just take it from me and from my experience and what I've learned from looking at what other cities have done. You don't have to go back to the drawing board and try it and fail at it yourself. You can just ask me what happened, and I'll be happy to tell you what happened to those other cities.
Sure. Good. Any other questions, comments? I have one, and this actually might be directed at Scott or somebody else, because De Pere does have a compost facility. We get, grass clippings and leaves and leaves. Do you know, Scott, how many of these things that are forbidden wind up in the De Pere compost facility that aren't supposed to be there? Is that a big problem for us?
I haven't looked at that list, but I know we do take vegetations, people's gardens in the fall when they clean them up. People throw pumpkins and stuff like that, so that goes into our compost piles.
Okay.
The actual food that this company's doing, the banana peels and all that stuff, we don't deal with.
Okay, and I know you're not supposed to be getting it at the compost site. I just didn't know if there was food waste that's winding up there, although we don't want it there. It's not intended to go there.
So we've actually in the past had people inquire. It's good that we now have a source we can refer them to. Is what is the city doing with food composting? We've had people ask why we don't get anything. It's kind of a costly venture because the manpower and stuff like that, and
Right.
and compared to what we got going on. So people have wanted to throw stuff out there. Have we seen stuff out there that probably shouldn't have been? Absolutely, but then it goes in the trash can. That's why we got trash cans out there, and ultimately goes in the landfill. So this is a good information to have because we can, pass this information on to people that want to compost.
Right. Okay, and part of my reason for asking is that I would be interested in some kind of a partnership if there's a way to kind of calculate how many people might participate in it. And one of our rationales for doing it that way is that if city staff right now are having to filter stuff out or clear it out at that site, if it's saving time and man hours there, then we can be more effective by directing it this way. I would like to see something like that go. Yeah.
And we can, the intent tonight was to, have a presentation done to see what the company's about. I know he briefly talked about, Corey talked about as far as partnerships. We can definitely, Corey and I can be in touch, what he's thinking, whether it's just word of mouth, getting him on, like right now, if you go to our Public Works website, things you can do for recycling and stuff like that. We could, look at potentially putting his information out there on our website for the residents, to go to, to further expand. I think some of the partnerships you're looking at is, monetary, the council would have to do, because I believe the one community you're talking about, the municipality help subsidize the
Right.
operations, for the company. So there's different partnerships. I think those are things Corey and I would have to talk about, and I would potentially bring back to the Sustainability Commission to see what the commission wanted to do.
Excellent. That's good. Hey, it was a great presentation. So
I
thank you very
should
much.
throw into this now. Obviously I'm a resident of Green Bay, so when I want to go to a yard waste site to say find some wood chips, I go obviously to the Green Bay one. I go to the West Side one. I will say that they work really hard. They're handling 20 tons at a time of this yard waste, and God bless them for doing it. That's hard work to have to move that. I know because I work on a tractor. I'm moving this material around, not at that large of a scale, but I will say there are a lot of plastic bottles in there, and what I've heard from arborists is, that's the men and women who are actually doing the arborist work, cutting the trees. They're the ones throwing the plastic bottles in there. That's how they end up in there. That's just an education thing. You could probably clean that problem up really quick just by talking to the workers and saying, hey, could you please not throw plastic bottles in there because it ends up in the compost.
Right.
I see Snickers wrappers in there. Like personally, I think one thing municipalities could do is they could probably, if they could afford it, get a trommel screener. Like I have a very small version of a screener, but they make very large screeners that a municipality like Appleton actually uses one. They run their compost that they make from yard waste through a trommel screener, so it filters out things like plastic bottles. And so they end up with a really high quality, they call it a grade A compost, and it probably looks just as good as mine. I don't know if it's actually as good because it doesn't have the variety of materials going into it, but it probably looks really great. A lot better than it would if there's plastic bottles in
Right.
it.
Obviously. Okay. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I know,
wonderful.
I really truly appreciate your expertise and just your delivery. And I know that your heart is so in this, and I love everything that you're doing. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Great.
what's the next step for us? Are we bringing this back? Are we gonna move ahead? What are we? Because I'm interested, I guess, I'm just
Yeah.
curious
Yeah,
what the next
Exactly.
step is.
I would like to see the city do something to subsidize so that for the peer residents, they can get a discounted cost or to reduce the cost. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I mean, there's really no action item tonight on it. It's a presentation, but like you indicated earlier, I can be in touch with Corey after the holidays and kind of talk about, what kind of partnership, looking at, bring back some different bullet points and thoughts and ideas to present to the commission, whether it's cost, no cost, that sort of thing. And then the commission can kind of determine how to move forward from there.
And go ahead,
I
Eric.
was gonna say, if I could make a recommendation, I'd like to see it brought back and maybe brought back for now, just to get the partnership going, to get the information on our website and get people signed up. Because if we're gonna get into a subsidy, that could be a lot longer and a lot bigger discussion. So that
Correct.
way we can at least make some positive steps.
And I'd like to be promoting it between now and then, because the more people that we get signed up, that's going to make it for an easier sell later on.
It might benefit you to hear this because I've done some thought about how I would go about partnering. What I would do if any municipality partnered with us, we'd set up a special webpage just for sign up for that municipality. And what I'm thinking we would try to do is something like where somebody would get a registration number or code from the municipality. So you would have a list of people who signed up. That would, first of all, give you an idea of how many people actually want to do this. Now, whether or not you let them all join right away, that's subject to your budgets and subject to, not growing us so fast that we break, because obviously if we take on 500 people in 2 seconds, that could be a problem. But if you grow it slower, you could say release a certain number of people. You could have 500 people register, but you could say we're only onboarding this many people per month to grow it over time. And that, I think, would build up some excitement for people, but they could get a registration number, which could then be used as somewhat like a coupon code. And then what would happen is when they'd sign up, they would immediately be getting the cost savings if it was being subsidized right up front. And then we would have some mechanism on the back end for basically invoicing the municipality. So we would do all that on the back end. The subscriber, the citizen wouldn't have to worry about that. We do all that. I did have one other idea, and I've never seen anybody do this, and I don't know how De Pere would feel about it, but I thought it might be creative. I was thinking about other ways you could potentially subsidize something to encourage people not just to sign up, but to stay long term. And the thought crossed my mind about what about a tax credit on property taxes to reward people for sticking with it, like a credit for every month that they're with it. Like if they can produce, because we send receipts to everybody every time they make a payment, they could use that as proof that they've been with the program. That's another way, because it's kind of like a backdoor way of rewarding people. You could either do that, or you could do an upfront subsidy, or a combination of the two. Basically, it's really open-ended. I'm open to any and all discussion, ideas, brainstorming sessions to try to think of, what would be right if De Pere did this? What would be right for De Pere? Because just because it works in Falls Church, Virginia, doesn't mean it's the right approach for De Pere. And maybe De Pere's got more creative ideas for how they could reward their residents for doing this. I think the whole point for me is just I'm trying to incentivize people to do this and to see the value in it. And I will tell you, when we started this service, I massively underpriced it. I did not understand the cost. Plus, when we took on our compost site in May, I will let you know, we didn't take out a loan. We're actually debt-free. My wife and I, as individuals and as a business, we have zero debt, which makes us pretty nimble. But we paid a pretty penny for that property. As you probably know, property prices are sky high, and that includes for agricultural property. I would say we got a good deal. I was a good negotiator. I got a good deal, but we still paid quite a bit. What I'd like to do, though, is factor in what we originally charged. When we started this service, we started charging, believe it or not, just $10 a month. That's not sustainable for us. But what we found is there was a lot more buy-in from people at $10. So it wasn't like they saw us as a bargain. They just liked that the price was low. When we raised the prices to $15 a month, we did lose some people. Because if you go higher with the price, even if it's out of necessity, you tend to price a certain segment of the population out. And we just had to raise it again because inflation, and we took on this compost facility, this property, plus we got a John Deere tractor to stop, so I could stop turning piles with a pitchfork. We're not passing all those costs on to everybody, but the $20 a month that we're charging for next year, it's more of a reflection of what do my wife and I actually need to be paid to want to dedicate our lives to doing this versus doing what I used to do. I used to work in call centers and I didn't like it. I'd rather do this than ever operate a call center again. And, but we need to keep a roof over our own heads and take care of ourselves. So I think we're kind of getting into the sweet spot now where we know how much we need to be charging per month. But yeah, if we can get the price down to something like $10 a month, like if, let's say, De Pere paid at half to $20, I bet you'd get a lot more uptake at $10 a month than we get at 20. I can almost guarantee double or triple the uptake.
Yep, understood. So again, I think that would be consideration for a future meeting, and if you want to have those conversations, I'm all for it. That sounds good.
And we could get you numbers too. We already keep track of all the waste everybody keeps out of landfill, but if De Pere wanted to, we would actually keep track of just how much the De Pere participants are keeping out, so De Pere could champion and brag about those numbers all over social media and say our city has kept this much out of landfill. So you would get individualized special treatment because we can break it out that way for anybody.
Very good. Cool. All right. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right, we're going to move on. So next on the agenda, discuss commission vacancy. Scott, did you want to go ahead with that?
I just wanted to let you know, Commissioner Gash had resigned, and then the mayor is currently in the process of filling a position, so I would imagine in January, if not February's meeting, we'd have a new person on board.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you. And next is a discussion of sustainable practices included in the city's 2023 budget. And I think this was a request from a previous meeting.
Yep.
Go ahead.
And so what I have in the packet was requested on our future agenda items. Thank you. Sorry about that. Basically, going through the approved budget that the council approved for 2023, you got the bullet points here of things that are sustainable type practices that we're looking at. We've been continued installation of LED lights in our city buildings, our street lighting throughout the city. That continues. We got a high energy efficient boiler that's getting replaced in City Hall in 2023. The police department, the police chief is looking at 4 hybrid cars for squad cars. My street superintendent's vehicle is going to be a hybrid type vehicle. We're looking at hybrid and potentially electric vehicles. The council approved, wiring our municipal service center for charging stations. Now, these ain't like charging stations. You go, the various businesses have the plug-in, but it gives us an ability for any of our fleet vehicles to actually be able to plug in that need to be plugged in. And then I believe the Parks Department has a pickup truck that's going to be looking at a hybrid type vehicle.
Thank you. And since this is a discussion item, I don't know if there's anything else that needs to be talked about. One of the reasons it came up, I think, at the previous meeting is that we as a commission were talking about what are things that we can do in the community. And it's a matter, and the green tier checklist and all the rest of that stuff. The city staff is doing certain things and trying to move towards sustainability, and I think then we have to look at other things that are either like this compost thing or things that we can do to get residents, to get citizens to buy in and say, we want to be moving in that same direction as well.
Mike, I have a question. I guess, is the push more to be electric or hybrid?
Well, we would look at electric, but the unfortunate thing with the cost of electric vehicles in our fleet, they're quite high.
Yep.
So we're looking at the hybrid type vehicles. We're looking at one of them. It's kind of like a Prius, where it runs on electric. Except when you hit the highway miles, because all our fleet really right now is either fuel type, whether it's leaded or regular. So as time goes on and the electric vehicles costs come down, we'd be pushing more on electric right now.
Fair.
Okay. Thank you. Next up then, number 5, discuss winter salt use for driveways and sidewalks.
So what a perfect opportunity to talk about it, because Mother Nature might be bringing us something. We might have to sprinkle our sidewalks and driveway.
A teachable moment.
What I got in your packet, and I got it up on the screen, is actually a connection to Saltwise, Wisconsin. And this is a group that recently formed to really talk about, ways, not only municipalities, but even the public and stuff, how to, minimize the amount of salt that goes on pavements. Because I believe it's for every tablespoon of salt,
It's right there.
actually pollutes 5 gallons of water.
It's
So what I
teeth.
did is pull up on the link that's in your, or part of your package. You can go in there and look, but hopefully I got it right here. It talks about salting guide here for sidewalk. I'm just gonna play it. Hopefully that, you probably can't hear it.
Can you move that microphone closer to the speaker? Maybe.
Is it coming out of your computer?
Yeah, is it from your laptop?
Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I was hoping that it's not working. But if you go on the website, it talks about, I mean, you can see with the practice that they're looking at right here, the spreading. You don't want to cake it on, you want to spread it. 1 cup, of salt like she got, it's basically, it'll do, up to 5 squares on your sidewalk. What you don't want to do right there is cake it on, because that's, too much salt like that. Apologize. It kind of shows you right here what, like a cake of sidewalk is. Every 1 cup will do about 4 sections of that. One of the things too that we like to toot our horn, our Public Works Department, for example, is probably a leader in what we've done over the last 10 plus years. I don't know. There we go. What we have done over the last 10 years, if not more, is what have we done to minimize salt in our operations? It's obviously, tomorrow into Thursday, we'll be going out, basically, there's an example right here, the Pere, we started back in 2008, being a champion of how to reduce salt. We started looking at putting brine down, and what brine does is helps. It's kind of like anti-icing, and what it does, if you think about cooking and you fry an egg in a pan, you don't put anything. What happens? It burns. Well, the brine, or you put butter in a pan, the egg comes out. Brine's the same principle, and what it does is, we put the brine down, for example, in pre-applications. It allows us the snow not to stick. It allows us not to use as much salt. The other thing that we started doing is we started pre-wetting our salt. So over the last, when we started implementing those, that type of techniques into our operations, we cut our salt quantity down by 30 to 40%. Not only saving the taxpayers money because salt is quite expensive, but actually the amount of salt that dissipates. And what pre-wetting does, I call it the salt mounds. Before we started pre-wetting, the salt would bounce off the pavements, and then a lot of times off the road. By pre-wetting, it sticks, and it actually is a lot more effective in the operations. A lot of communities have started doing what we've done, bought the equipment, doing the different things we've done. So we've kind of been a leader in that. And Saltwise reached out to us. We've done presentations here for other communities to our operations just to show them how, the ways we've done to cut down on salt. Because this is not just, in the state, but it's across the nation. I know my street superintendent goes to national conferences. He's a lecturer and stuff like that, and they're talking, out in the West Coast, East Coast, different places. What can they do to minimize the salt? So we're all in this together. But this is a great website for you folks on the commission to look at, and kind of educate not only yourself, but you can pass it on information to others. But the key thing is, like I said, I wanted to show for those of you that probably salt your sidewalks if you have them, what to do or not to do. So that was requested at our last meeting for information on that.
Can I add some things? Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. So some alternatives to salting, obviously using less, but one of the things you can do is sweep the salt after. I know Saltwise and Fox Wolf does a big push where they will go into businesses, or they'll ask, they'll be like, oh, if you run into a business that has a lot of salt out front, just go in and say, hey, do you guys sweep that up afterwards? Because it is 1 teaspoon of salt permanently pollutes 5 gallons of water. And like the whole thing used to be, the solution to pollution is dilution. It's not really a thing anymore because there's literally a finite amount of water. So we're just polluting it more and more every year. And then alternatives to salt. So using things like sand, and then you can sweep that up afterwards, or using bird seed, because that, again, you have to probably sweep, but the birds are happy. Shoveling early and often, because if you don't have that snow that then compacts on your driveway or your sidewalks, you don't get that ice. That's another nice thing to do to share with people. And I had something else and I've lost it now. Because obviously I used to do a lot of outreach and education about this. What was the other thing? Oh, 15 degrees. Most salts don't work once it hits 15 degrees, and so you have to use a different type of salt or a different solution type thing. So yeah, tell people about it when you're out and about. Go in and be like, sweep your salt, man.
And one of the things to add on to the temperature, Emily's spot on, is that one of the things that the pier has is you have to remove all snow and ice from your sidewalks within 48 hours. One of the things is when the temperatures do get cold, salt does not work, and especially if you don't, shovel often, you get compacted on there. We do tell people, as long as you make an effort to clear the snow, and then actually you put, we say sand, but you can actually use kitty litter too, or bird seed, something that shows that there's traction on there so people don't slip. We won't come by and actually try to scrape it off for you. We'll see there's effort in. And then when things warm up where you can scrape it off, then you scrape off the compacted snow and ice and remove it from the sidewalk.
Okay. And do you know, Scott, with the city's social media site, is there a link to SaltWise, or is that something we can get onto the Facebook page or do other things to, since we're coming into the winter season, to get these messages out?
We could definitely, Betty, we can get something on the website.
Okay, I would appreciate that. That's fantastic. Okay. Anything else on salt?
When are those videos coming out? Or did they already? The mayor's corner?
I don't know.
Scott, this might be off on a tangent, but at the last meeting, we talked about using the mayor's corner, and was that going to be about salt usage? They were going to do something like that. Do you know if that's happened yet, or if that's
I do not know.
still in the works? Okay.
I know Tony did meet with Justine and make some videos, but I don't know if Justine's still editing or where they're at.
Okay. So we'll follow up on that and find out what's going on.
Excited.
Thank you. Quite good. All right. Moving ahead, item 6, discussion of monthly sustainability and stormwater information.
This one's for Betty.
Nice.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had her put it on the agenda, but what it was is Betty and I frequently get information, whether it's from Noose or Fox Valley or different, even like Saltways. We wanted to talk about, do you folks want that? We can forward it to you by email. We blind copy. Typically, when you see stuff that comes from Betty or myself, it's blind copy because we don't want people to respond and get a conversation going. You want that information shared with you folks?
I would appreciate that, yes.
I would.
I think one of the issues is, everybody that's here is already pretty invested, and we're getting information like that already from other sources. I'd love to hear more, but I think it's also getting it out to community members, at least in digestible stuff where it's going to be useful. But
We can do them.
yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Penny.
Mr. Rakers also receives those, and it almost immediately has Andy put them on Facebook.
Okay, perfect. So that's helpful. Thank you. Sure.
I'm a member of an organization named Envision Greater Green Bay, and we do utilize foresight technologies, we do a lot of searching and collecting of information. We use a collection method called, it's an app named, thank you, named Digo.
Thank you.
And we use this all the time. We're just working with the botanical gardens in the last couple months and set them all up on collecting information into specific categories. They call them groups in DIGO. Well, I've been collecting community sustainability information in my DIGO account for my last couple of years, I think. And the question is, how do you and should you kind of share this? And I'm thinking that it might be something that I could share with someone legally. I don't know what's needed to be legal in that regard, but maybe if I do it with Scott or whatever, and let them see how it works, because if you set up like a Google alert, Google sends you into your email a batch of articles that are on the website somewhere that they've picked up that relate to the keywords that you have asked them to look for. So I'm getting community sustainability information coming in probably almost daily into my email account. And I just look through those, and if any of them look relevant or significant to what we're doing, I zap them into the DIGO grouping. And if we did set this up, you could make it public, so maybe that gets legal, and you would have, all of you would have access to that. You'd be in that group specifically, and anytime you wanted to put information in, you could, or if you wanted to access what other people would put in there, that could work also. So I don't want to kind of push this on you all, but if it's something that you want to experiment with and see if it might be of value, I know we're using it very actively. We used it with the Casa Alba people when we did a project with them last spring and summer. We're doing it with Botanical, and we're doing it with a couple of internal groups. And I think this when I look at it, I don't see that there's any downside to it. It's an excellent way to collect, to go out and reach. Now you can go well beyond Google Alerts. There's many other ways that you can put information in there. You can go to Twitter accounts and throw Twitter accounts in there. And if you don't understand Twitter very well, there's, some of the best sustainability people in the world work on Twitter, because that's where a lot of people do use it productively. It's not just a waste-o situation that we hear about. But there's a lot of other websites that you can go to and put things in there, and you can do it worldwide. That's not an issue. I think I had one this morning that I was putting in that was from some European country that about their sustainability project. So I just threw that out, and if you want to access it, come and talk to me, and we'll make sure that Scott blesses our the legality of what we're doing.
Okay, thanks very much. Anything else on this agenda item? Again, it's a discussion item, so stuff you need to know, want to know. Then if we can move ahead to item 7, discussion and possible action on a clean air ordinance. And again, this has been in the works for a long time. I have to admit that since the previous meeting, I haven't done a lot with this, so it's kind of where we left it, which is, I think the draft of the initiative, if we were to take it to the council in its current form, it probably would not pass. But I have no way of knowing for sure how they might vote on that. So it's a discussion, and if we want to do anything to go forward with this, or just let it be for now. So,
are you suggesting they've seen it and they've heard about it and suggested that they wouldn't vote for some parts of it?
it was in an agenda packet in do you remember, Scott, was it a July meeting?
Yep.
And even before it came up to a council vote, in just discussion with individual members ahead of time, they had many questions and many reservations. And at that time, we didn't vote at the meeting, so I asked to have it tabled at the council meeting, and instead of making it an ordinance that's going to be enforceable, that it be more of an education or an initiative that we can do to get people voluntarily to shut their vehicles off so we don't have idling issues. But since that meeting, I don't know of anything that's significant that's been done with the language that's here. Did you want to add something to that, Scott?
No, I mean, you pretty much covered it. The only thing was, the commission may want to look, the ordinances, like you're speeding. It's an ordinance, for example, you get a ticket on, where, the council may be reluctant to approve something like that, where the commission might want to take a step back. And, a lot of it, I've heard some of the discussions here at the commission, more into education, that sort of thing. Potentially, you may want to look at maybe creating a resolution that talks about the things the commission wants to do to minimize how often people, I know, for example, you might spell out in a resolution, by education with schools, because one of the biggest things is the former commissioner here, the parents that pick up their kids, they idle for 15, 20, 30 minutes, and the concern on that. Maybe the part of that education is we'll start with the schools and let the schools let the parents know. So there maybe, instead of going with the ordinance, maybe you start with a resolution, talking about things the commission would like to see, the education, any other things, maybe, that we put into it. My suggestion would be if, maybe, Commissioner Quigley was, looking at doing it. Maybe this is something that you and I could, further discuss. Maybe at the discretion at the commission is what they want to do, whether they want to move forward an ordinance or a resolution, that sort of thing.
Okay, I would certainly be open to that conversation if that's something you and I want to discuss together.
I would really like to see, at the very least, an awareness campaign like what you're speaking of. I mean, I work at a school, I see this all the time, and you can have those conversations with parents, but I will tell you it's a lot easier if there is an awareness campaign
Right.
that you can, in a professional manner, suggest to schools use it, or that you can share with parents. People can take it or leave it, but that awareness that's out there, because especially this time of year, the idling is so much worse, and a lot of parents don't understand that those fumes are just going right back into the school. And so I would love to see an awareness campaign, and then post it on Facebook, and maybe even have the mayor talk about it in one of his corners. And I just think there's so much that we could do from that point. And could it evolve? Maybe, but at the very least, I think we need
We have
something.
to start there.
Yeah.
I went through this whole score sheet since our last meeting and highlighted things and, did my stuff. But I wrote start at schools, right? Because that seems to be the biggest problem, is that, I now do 4K pickup, and the parents sit there and I want to rap on all their windows and be like, knock it off. But yeah, maybe it is, or maybe we come talk to the little kids or something. So yeah, that was mine. My other question is, so we have two things under vehicle idling, which I think that's what we were trying to do, was words are escaping me. But we have ban idling more than 5 minutes for local government vehicles, and De Pere scored a 3 in there. And so I guess I would like to see how we could maybe get that to a 5, since it is going to be harder to do the community-wide and try and get all of the points there, and then do a campaign for the community to try and push us or something. I don't know. Those are my thoughts on it.
Okay, go ahead.
The banning for the city operations, I can give you the rationale why we didn't score a 5.
Yeah.
Because of the operations of the overall city operations. There's physically no way you can, not run certain vehicles like fire trucks
Right,
or
okay.
police squads or vehicles that you can't shut off in a winter type of a thing.
Yeah.
I know we have an internal type policy to minimize all-way idle, but, when they look at banning, they want complete,
Yeah,
you
okay.
don't idle anything. That'd be darn near impossible to get to that 5.
I mean, that's fair. That's what I was curious about. So. Okay.
How about this, and between now and, our next meeting is January, is that correct? Between now and the next meeting, Scott, if I have a conversation with you and we get some kind of a draft resolution, and then Janie, if I can sit down and meet with you and anybody else that wants to chime in, is it appropriate, can I send it out before the meeting if we have a draft? Or does it really need to be discussed at the formal meeting?
Well, my suggestion would be is, if you're looking at, like I mentioned earlier, coming back with a resolution, I heard campaigning, education. Is there certain things as a sustainability commission you would like to see? These are the little things I would include in that resolution. And, as staff, we would create that resolution for the commission with these different bullet points. So if you got, various things you would like, and right now not go for the ordinance, but just do the campaign, the education, that sort of thing, we can create that.
Okay.
So in the meantime, over the next couple weeks, if you got some bullet points for any of the commission, just send Betty and I that email, and we can, right after the first of the year, we can develop a draft resolution, and then bring it back for the commission for further discussion. And if it's something we can tweak at it, maybe, hopefully shoot, if it doesn't work, then January meeting, we could look at the February meeting at the latest, try to get something we push forward to council with that resolution.
Okay, and so just to be clear, in the packet for tonight's meeting, page 33, there's a draft of a resolution, which is a clean air ordinance, and that was going to be a legally enforceable thing, which is not what we're pursuing at this time. We're talking more of an awareness campaign and ways to get the word out. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I think you know my opinion on the ordinance.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think you framed it up pretty well on page 30 of the packet with items 1, A, and B. With your, I think that's a pretty good starting point from
Okay.
an informational standpoint, just for my 2 cents.
Yep. Yeah, and that's, again, that page 30 was a suggestion that I sent to Scott, and I said, well, if we have a subgroup or a smaller, we're not really pursuing that because we're not supposed to meet outside of the commission meetings here, but, okay, I appreciate that feedback. Anything else discussion-wise on this one? Yes, sir?
Commissioner Akers, could you clarify, are you referring to, Commissioner Quigley's memo 1?
Yes, in and around the city to Pere, measurable success will be addressed in 3 stages, and I like the stage 1: education, information campaign, setting up network of partners, recruiting volunteers, language, flyers, social media, etc. So yes, is that
Okay.
clear?
Yeah, so then 2 and 3 now, but 1 A and B.
You might mention the schools specifically in that area as being stakeholders in that, if
Yep.
not.
Yeah, that's listed in the.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think part of it, I also work in the schools, is having somebody in the building or on the property, somebody that the parents and that the families know. Because if you just go up and some stranger starts banging on the window and says, hey, don't idle your car, that's not gonna go over so well. But if it's somebody that's connected with the school, we're gonna get much more buy-in, and then it becomes an education thing rather than saying, hey, don't do this.
I mean, you could even give out information to the kids to take home to their parents, because I know,
What I'm
from the city standpoint, we deal with parking and traffic, and we have people parking in the schools that shouldn't be there as long, and some of the schools have handed out information for the parents to say this is a loading zone, not a parking zone,
Okay.
you can't walk your, blah, blah. So we could do something similar there.
Love it. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Next, any future agenda items? Anything you'd like us to be discussing when January rolls around? Go ahead, Scott.
One of the things that was on the future agenda for last meeting, we did not bring back, because I knew we were going to probably run along with this presentation, was to talk about things the commission wanted to, work plan. So that's probably gonna be a pretty good discussion on that, just kind of determining things the commission wants to see moving forward. And pick a few things that the commission's interested, tackling, and, I know in previous commission meetings, we've had many meetings, trying to narrow a list down from 30 down to maybe a handful, because we can't do it all at once, but I call it baby steps, but I would suggest staff will bring that back at the January meeting.
Okay, very good. Eric?
I heard when Corey was talking, the discussion that Green Bay has a landfill alternative list on their website. Is that something we have, and if not, could we discuss is putting up on our information?
Yes.
Scott, yes, it'll be on the agenda, or yes, is it done already?
No, I need to, I apologize, I gotta look into it.
Okay,
Well,
but,
Oh, that's easy.
yep,
I mean, the other item too, depending on what Corey and I talk about, bringing potentially that back in January's meeting too.
fantastic. Okay. No other future agenda items. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. Thanks very much.